All right, so his answer for how it is that from all over the globe that we can have these same kinds of ideas and understandings and so forth is this thing he calls the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious. The collective unconscious. You want to have that written down. Again, if I repeat these things, you guys, more notes, man. I'm looking out there, I just see that we only have that written down, those definitional things. The collective unconsciousness is this. It's a reservoir of collective human experience that we access through the unconscious. Make sense? Is that clear?
Unconscious. I don't know what unconscious is.
What's that?
I don't know what unconscious is.
Yeah, all of these things here are probably a bit challenging. I like this graphic because the graphic here seems to actually explain what it means maybe better than my words can. And this is an ancient engraving, by the way. This is not something that Jung comes up with. The collective unconscious is this idea that there are these various levels of consciousness. You have your consciousness, that's the things that you're aware of. And you have your unconscious, which are like your personal memories, things that you experienced in your life that you're not necessarily conscious of, but you know, like once in a while, you'll be reminded of something. You know? I have a good friend of mine. I've been friends with him since high school. His name is Billy. And he's great to have around because he reminds me of who I was in high school. I can never ever claim like I studied hard. You know, I respected my teachers. Prices were reasonable. Politicians were honorable back then. And we used to walk to school in the snow, uphill, both ways, home and to school. It was a difficult time. I can never talk like that because Billy's always there to go, really, Scanlon? You worked hard in high school, huh? Shut up. I won't talk about it. I can never claim to be anything other than what I really was because he's always there to remind me about what I really was. But it's the once in a while he'll say something like, hey, Scott, remember that time that you... I won't even mention it. But I'll go, yeah, I remember that. Like if he were to come in here, he would tell you guys stories about me that I've completely forgotten. Those are things that are in my unconscious. Once you mention to me, I go, oh yeah, that's right. That's right. You know? Like one of my former students, whatever. He reminded me of a story, something that I did a few years ago. And I'd completely forgotten about it. And as soon as he mentions it, I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's your personal unconsciousness. That's stuff that is, you don't remember it, but you can be reminded of it. Does this make sense? So for Jung, we're going to see in a minute, he's got this thing below that he thinks is the collective unconscious. So just like you have your own personal unconscious memories, there's also an unconscious memory pool for all of humanity. Your ancestors, people who aren't even your ancestors, but they go way back in, for humanity, that's where they draw from, as we're going to see. I won't even ask if that makes sense yet, because it can't. I have this little chart here. I would copy this chart if I were you. Writes it up here that we have the psyche. The psyche is, he says here, your total thoughts, behavior. Your psyche is you. So if I asked you, who are you? Your answer would be kind of like your psyche. So to understand who you are, you have to unpack the contents of your psyche. And as I just mentioned, there are 3 different levels of it. You've got your consciousness. Can you guys see this okay? I want you to see it. Spend a lot of time on it. And it's really pretty. You have the stars and everything in the background. You've got your consciousness, which are the things about which you're aware. That's the first level here. Your consciousness are the things about which you're aware. So if I were to ask you, what's your favorite food, what day is today, what classroom are you sitting in, those are the things about which you're aware. And we can think of that as your ego. Your ego here, your ego is your personality as you are aware of it. Your ego is your personality as you are aware of it. And that means if I were to ask you, so tell me about yourself. The things that you would say, that's your personality. That's your ego. That's who you think that you are. And I've also described it here as the command headquarters. It's the gatekeeper between what goes into your consciousness and what goes into your unconsciousness. So the idea is that everything that you experience goes into one or the other. So for example, if I ask you what today is and you say Tuesday, you're conscious of that. And yet, if you just notice that someone dropped a pen, and then now earlier in the period, now you have completely forgotten about that, that got sent into your unconscious, your personal unconscious. So the ego is the thing that decides if something goes into your consciousness or your unconsciousness. Everything you experience ends up in one or the other. Even the things that you think you have forgotten about. Or I guess, even the things that you have forgotten about, sorry. And so for Jung, we want to make the unconscious conscious. Because these things do still impact you. The things that go into your unconscious impact you. And the ego is the thing that sorts it out. Yeah. And then they just keep the handcuffs on me and lock me up overnight. Officer, it's never too late to change. That wasn't even me. That guy had 2 shoes on.
You have normal legs, I do.
He had normal legs. His legs were the same length. Look at mine. So your psyche is your total thoughts. Your psyche is all of this. Your unconscious plus your conscious put together. That's you. That's the you that drives the car, the you that drives the body. And so self-discovery is when we combine these two. When you become when you bring what's here into here. Because until we make the unconscious conscious, we'll do what we've always done, and we'll just call it fate. So in other words, these are the things that are affecting your personality, that are driving your behaviors. Until you can bring these things here, they'll still continue to drive your behavior, but you'll think that it's just the way that you are. But the way that you decide who you're going to be is to bring these things here, is to bring these things up into here, and then work through them. Everybody still ready? Subliminal. So you guys have heard before the idea of subliminal, I guess subliminal messaging. So subliminal just means it's kind of below the threshold. And that's the stuff that we send, that the ego rejects and sends into the unconscious. So the stuff that ends up over here, that's just called the subliminal. Whatever ends up that the ego rejects from the consciousness, sends into the unconscious, that's subliminal stuff. So subliminal messaging, and you probably know what that is. And this is where your complexes happen. So when you were a child, a small child, especially before the age of 5, if your parents gave you, made you the center of the universe, and then you grow up and you're 18, and you think you're the center of the universe, that's a complex. That's because your parents gave you too much attention. If your parents locked you in a closet with a box of crackers and some water, and then you emerge after 18 years, you're going to have a complex that your parents didn't give you enough love. So you want to be somewhere kind of in the middle. You don't want too much attention, you also don't want too little attention. That's how you get a human being who's well balanced. Of course, wisdom is knowing what's too much. But the complexes that we have, can we give an example of a complex?
God complex?
Yeah, exactly. A God complex. You think you're God. Well, maybe not literally, but you think that you're the most powerful being. That would be that probably comes from some sort of childhood experiences. If I were to ask you, you might not be conscious of it, but whatever experience led you to that complex is down here somewhere. So how do you overcome it? You make it. You bring it up to the awareness. You analyze, bring it to the awareness, and then you can deal with it. Sometimes Jung stuff gets complicated, but he draws a distinction between the unconscious and the subconscious. It's outside the purview of what we're doing, but there are some things he says that you can analyze and some things that you just can't analyze. But you want to bring as much stuff from here as possible up so that you can analyze it. I think later in the PowerPoint I mentioned a bunch of complexes, but we're only going to look at one more slide. So then I have here things about which you're not conscious, but they influence your emotions and your behavior. So if you're somebody who has like anger issues and you're just not sure why, that's because there's something down here that's causing you to have anger issues. That would be a complex as well. If you're somebody who desperately seeks the attention and validation of others, there's a reason you're seeking the validation of others. It's something down here. If I asked you why, you might not know. But if you analyze, maybe you can find out why. Very light touch. Here, come on, back up. There we go. And then finally, this is the collective unconscious. I wrote down a description of universal psychic structures, which is not going to be helpful. But it's descriptive, and it will make sense, hopefully. These are things, and I just wrote a bunch of stuff over here. Yeah, see, there's where I fixed the anima. I gave you some of the definitions here. So that you have ancestral memories, things that your great-grandparents, your ancestors went through. The shadow, which we'll get to later. Archetypes, which we'll get to later. And you have the anima. The anima is the inner feminine side of men. So when they say, like, men are in touch with their feelings or whatever, the stereotypical feminine, that's called the anima. And then you have the animus, which is the inner masculine side of women. So these two you're going to have to know. Anima. Anima is the inner feminine side of men, specifically of men. And the animus, which is the inner masculine side of women. And then finally, synchronicity, which is things that seem like they're meaningfully connected, but they're really not. So for example, last week, I messaged a friend of mine, and I was on Instagram, and I was in the middle of messaging him, and then he sent me a video. And so I responded to him and go, dude, I was just messaging you. And he responded back in all capitals, synchronicity. Was there yeah, because he studies psychology.
Oh, okay.
He's big on he's big on you. I wouldn't be surprised if he does his PhD in this stuff. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Really smart dude, and a really good fighter too. He's both. He's a unicorn.
Unicorn. Yeah,
unicorn. So, was there a connection between like me messaging him and him sending me the video? No. It was just one of those things. It's a coincidence. How many times have I messaged him and he wasn't sending me a video? How many times has he sent me something and I wasn't messaging him? Hundreds of times. But that one time it happens, we go, whoa, that's so weird. I was just sending you something. Of course, if you message someone enough, that will happen. But so it's not really meaningfully connected. We just think it is. That's synchronicity. Things that seem meaningfully connected but are not actually connected. So you'll hear me refer to these things here, the anima, the animus, and synchronicity. Questions? Comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Yes? It's a good question. Let me look. Stand by. I know it's something jiu-jitsu related. Because he was like, I want to do this. Jose, I'm talking about you because he watches these videos. December 27th, synchronicity.
I don't know how you said it was funny.
That's all I taught. Oh, it was a takedown, that's right. It was, got it. It was some judo guys doing some stuff in black and white. It's an old video. That's what it was. right, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? All right, you've all been wonderful sports. So we'll pick this up next time.